Okay, well, how much of the housing and market bubble boils down to psychology? My next guest argues much of it. Later this morning, he'll be talking at a National Science Foundation webcast about the science behind housing, and he's Yale University economist Robert Shiller, co-founder of the Case-Shiller Home Price Index, which we're all very familiar with, and he's coming to us from Yale's campus in New Haven, Connecticut. Mr. Shiller, thanks so much for being with us.
Hi.
Okay, and before we talk about this webcast and sort of what you're going to be discussing, which is the psychology behind markets and behind the housing market in particular, we saw your index yesterday seem to show some good news, a month-on-month rise in home prices. Is this a sign that we're seeing stabilization here?
It's definitely a good sign because home prices are different from other speculative prices. They have momentum, and they've been going down, down, down. And this is the first time in almost 3 years that they've gone up. Part of it is just due to the summer season, but, you know, it's definitely a good sign.
And what is that? Have you examined what's the reason behind that? Is it partly because we've had mortgage rates come down, or is it just that demand is coming up? What is behind that?
Well, home prices have come way down. They used to be at record or near record levels in terms of relative to construction costs or rents or incomes, and now they're back in a normal range. So you have to expect that the bubble burst and it's over. The question that remains is how much overshooting there will be. We were worried that home prices would get abnormally low. And maybe they still will, but this is a sign that maybe things are the real crash phase is coming to an end.
That perhaps that is behind us, but then the recovery phase, Mr. Shiller, is that going to be is that going to be a V shape, or are we talking about a painful recovery?
Well, unfortunately, it depends on the whole economy, on the success of the Obama policies. Beyond that, on the success of governments around the world to try to end this world recession. This recession has lasted longer than any recession in the whole post-war period so far. You might say it's about time that this would end, but you know, it's still an unknown. This was a severe recession, and I would say that it's looking better, but we could still see home price falls for some time.
Perhaps through the end of this year?
I think that we're kind of in uncharted territory. I'm hopeful that things are turning up, but you know, I'm worried about the economy. We have an unemployment rate that is at 9.5%, and it looks like it's heading up. And it's harming our confidence. It had a big surge since March, but confidence is starting to falter. Yeah, it's really uncertain at this point.
It wouldn't make sense for housing prices to bottom at a time when you haven't seen unemployment peak yet. But Mr. Shiller, let's get to your webcast, because you're going to be talking at the National Science Foundation about the psychology behind the housing market. Is housing really the place where psychology plays the most in terms of whether or not people buy or sell?
Well, more recently it has. I think, well, psychology is always important about the home. But I think that in the last 10 years or more, or maybe several decades, people have gotten to think of housing as a speculative investment. They really didn't so much before. So there's been a cultural change. And that cultural change may mean that we'll see volatility going forward. Incidentally, this recovery, this is about the one-year anniversary of the Housing and Economic Recovery Act under the Bush administration, which did a number of things to support the housing market, and the most important of them was to put Fannie and Freddie under, well, give the government authority to put Fannie and Freddie under conservatorship and save them. Right. If they hadn't done that, we would be in much worse situation now.
Well, taking a look, though, at, you know, for those who are thinking about buying a house or have bought one like I just did just a few weeks ago, is housing, though, still, do we have to unlearn sort of this idea that housing is going to eventually be our main source of investment, or is an investment where you can make a whole lot of money on, which was this whole period of speculation that we saw in the last decade or so?
Well, I teach elementary finance, and principle number one is diversify. The mistake that people have made that is really intensifying this crisis, and it's not their mistake, it was authorities recommending that they do this, is to put all of your life savings in one house and borrow. So it's a leveraged investment. and hope that and start living and not saving on the expectation that you're going to be a millionaire as this house grows. That was a big mistake. It was a big risk management mistake.
And perhaps a lesson learned for many Americans here. Robert Shiller, thanks so much for joining us on this topic on housing. Always good to see you. Robert Shiller, Yale University economist and, of course, co-founder of the Case Shiller Home Price Index. Well, up